Somebody who's a healthy leader will be somebody who's ethical, kind, and show respect to themselves and to other people, so that influences how they are as a leader, and also that they use purpose and values to guide them in what they say and do. And they keep purpose and values center stage. And very importantly and crucially is that they look at the shadow side, the negative aspects of themselves, and work on that. And they do the same for their organizations and the people that they manage. So those are the key elements of healthy leadership. So the concept in golden and shadow is that within us as human beings, we have golden sides to ourselves and shadow sides. So the golden aspects are things like being honest, being kind, having compassion, living honorably. And most of the positive aspects, the golden sides of ourselves, we do know and we do acknowledge and we see it in ourselves. Whereas the converse applies to the shadow side, where the shadow side is where we sort of may know of their existence, or things like occasionally lying, or not telling the truth, or sometimes being rude. We may notice it, but we generally tend not to recognize it or acknowledge it. Now, most of us will work from the golden side, and occasionally we will shift to the shadow side, but then sort of realize it and come back. So an example from my point of view is from my experiences. A while ago, I had to chair quite a difficult mediation, and I had to be patient and considerate throughout the day. But and fortunately, the meeting came to a good, successful outcome. And then as the meeting closed and as I was relaxing, I took a phone call from a junior colleague who needed some advice. And thinking back to that phone call, I actually wasn't as patient with that person as I could have been and I should have been. So that was sort of like an example of me moving to the shadow side. Most of us will work from the golden, as I said. There are very few people who just will operate from the shadow side and use the negative behaviors. They like it, they enjoy it. Some may deny that they are shadow, but they continue working from the shadow side. I think in terms of leaders, there are three that I think are really, really important. One is respect for yourself and other people, to be honest alongside being ethical, and being kind. So if you have respect for yourself, you're more likely to be a centered leader. And if you respect others, you will treat them with courtesy, with kindness. And honesty with yourself and with others will build trust. And kindness is just really, really important because it's a basic human quality that we should be, and it's good for us to think of being kind to ourselves and also kind to others. In terms of the organizations, I would still say respect, because when there is respect in an organization, from the leadership to the staff, from the staff to the leadership, you're going to see people who are comfortable working, who will be prepared to do that extra thing, who will be prepared to work, who will be prepared to really do their utmost. Key shadow behaviors, I think, that we tend to see in leadership, generally arrogance and hubris, and then which then reflects through in other parts to others in the organization. And unfortunately, these days, still a lot of bullying, discrimination, and harassment. Those are the key things that you will see in an organization across sectors. Very unfortunately, those are the main ones. If you just look at the research, even if you just look at the last 20, 30 years of research, bullying and harassment and discrimination come across as the top behaviors when people look at toxicity. And because there is a serial failure to address these behaviors, what you're seeing is what's happening is those who are carrying out those behaviors are not being tackled, they're not being addressed, and they're not, in fairness to them, they're not being given the help they need to look at those behaviors, to be given an opportunity to change. And because nothing significant is being done in most instances, people continue suffering, sometimes in silence, and the impact of those shadow behaviors is huge. It has a massive psychological effect on. I think people they think they don't know what to do to tackle those individuals with those behaviors, and you need a certain amount of courage to properly address those behaviors. I've only ever worked with one director of human resources who did appropriately tackle those behaviors. Generally, the person is moved from one part of the organization to the other, and because those behaviors aren't tackled, they're being tacitly reinforced to continue because nobody's saying this is not acceptable. And I think it's also that policies and procedures are not being implemented, or they don't exist. And if there is an internal justice system like an ombudsperson, they may not be working effectively. Those systems may not be trusted. So it's a variety of reasons, but the key thing is a lack of courage and willingness to take that risk. If I think about the various experiences I've had over the years in different sectors, what makes an organization move from golden to shadow, I think is what type of person the powerful are and whether they are promoting golden or whether they're promoting shadow. If I'll give one example is there's an organization that actually didn't exist. It was asked to be created, and the key group developed a very value-based strategy, an excellent strategy, and they developed this strategy. It was extremely value-based. They employed staff who were like-minded, who wanted, again, to implement values, and their junior staff were taking part. People were working. The aim, the purpose was being achieved, but there weren't too many policies. The minimum amount of policies and procedures were there, but I would describe that as a golden organization. What then happened is some of the leadership left, and they brought in a new chief executive who didn't like the amount of freedom in the organization, who was really worried about the number of policies and procedures that he felt were missing. And he was quite risk averse. So he spent his first 6 months producing a whole swathe of policies and procedures, which he then implemented. And he also stopped junior staff being involved in some of the policy initiatives and attending senior meetings. So that led to people being very stifled. They did the job, but not as wholeheartedly as before. And they felt excluded because, they were actually excluded. Well, for themselves is to create a time and space where they will feel relaxed enough to explore their golden and their shadow side. And it may be as simple as writing down keywords that describe their golden side and keywords that describe their shadow side, just leaving that, and then coming away and reflecting and seeing what it says about themselves and what's true about what they've written about themselves, and then think about how they can use the golden aspects to maybe shift and change one shadow and then it's important to change a little bit, not hugely, so that if you start that journey and you keep repeating that, you're going to grow, and in terms of your having a better balance between golden and shadow. From an organizational perspective, this is not, I think, just stop and think about where you would locate your organization in terms of golden or shadow, and whether if it's more on the golden side, then working with your deputies or team may be easier to look at both golden and shadow, perhaps in the way that I've just described for an individual leader. But if you're more on the shadow side, then I would say take time to work out how you can get more openness to at least have that discussion. Often you can start it by declaring your shadow side yourself, and so that you start that discussion in a non-threatening way, and you don't get swallowed by any backlash.